Hi, everybody. This is David Jensen. I am the Sales Development Manager for ClearPlex Films. Welcome to Madico's April webinar series. The topic of today's presentation is ClearPlex installation tutorial. We would like to thank you for taking time out of your day to join us. The webinar will last about 1 hour with time throughout the presentation for questions and answers. Just to give you kind of an idea of what you guys will be going through today. This is a comprehensive installation tutorial that covers everything from the installation tools used to how to clean prep the windshield, to how to cut the film, to how to heat shrink the film, and finally how to install ClearPlex. The videos have all been pre-recorded, like I mentioned, and they will appear in sequential order. So for example, the clean prep video will show first, and then the install video will show last, with the cutting and heat shrinking in the middle. Thank you, and here we go. All right, so starting off, for anybody that was not present in our last presentation, which was an introduction to ClearPlex, I did just want to give people some context about ClearPlex, about the product, about the company, and about how ClearPlex is now a product that is both manufactured and sold directly by Madico. So let me give a quick overview of the history of ClearPlex. The concept of ClearPlex windshield protection film came about in 2005 from a group of PhD professors from Brigham Young University in Provo, Utah. After a period of time spent in R&D, perfecting the product's construction and characteristics, these professors contacted several different window film manufacturers to see who would be best suited to manufacture this innovative new product. After careful deliberation in 2006, Madico was selected as the manufacturing partner. Shortly thereafter, a patent was filed in 2007, which was later awarded in 2011. Domestic sales started in 2008, followed by international sales in 2009. 2010 through 2015 saw dramatic growth of ClearPlex, as well as the formal issuing of our 3 patents. Next takes us to 2016. 2016 was the year when ClearPlex was acquired by Madico. After the Madico acquisition, ClearPlex has seen tremendous growth both domestically and internationally, and looking forward to 2020 and beyond, we expect to maintain our place as the world leader of windshield protection film. Okay, so this video is going to be the introduction video, and we're going to go over all of the installation tools. Again, I just want to remind you guys, set your volume to the highest setting.
Good afternoon. My name is David Jensen. I'm the Sales Development Manager of ClearPlex Films for Madico. Thank you for joining us today for the ClearPlex installation tutorial webinar. These videos have been pre-recorded in order to preserve the video quality and resolution as we stream this tutorial over our Zoom conference. The videos are going to be broken up into segments. The first segment is going to cover our installation tools. Our installation tools are broken up between our clean prep tools, our cutting tools, our heat shrinking tools, and our installation tools. First, to go over our clean prep tools, we have our tape measure. You use a tape measure to measure the height of the windshield to determine the width of film that you're going to use, as well as the width of the windshield to determine the amount of film you will need to pull off to cover that specific windshield. Next, you have your ratchet wrench set. This is the tool you're going to use if you have to remove the windshield wipers. We did have to remove the windshield wipers on the vehicle that we're installing on today. The vehicle that we're installing on is a 2019 Land Rover Discovery. Next, we have our white scrub pad, 1-inch scraper, and 3-inch scraper. These are the tools that you're going to use to break up any stuck-on dirt and debris that might be on the windshield. Next, you just have your standard cleaning squeegee. This is what you're going to use to remove any of the cleaning slip solution that you use during the cleaning part of the process. Next, we have our 91% undiluted alcohol solution spray bottle, and then our slip solution spray bottle. Our 91% undiluted alcohol spray bottle is what you're going to use to remove any ceramic coatings or hydrophobic coatings that might be on the glass. This slip solution, this spray bottle you're going to use for the cleaning for your cleaning part of the process, your wet shrinking part of the process, as well as your installation when you're laying the film onto the actual glass. You use the same slip solution for all 3 steps of the installation process. The soap to water ratio that I use is I do 12 healthy drops of soap in this 32-ounce bottle. What I recommend is that you use what you're comfortable with in your geographic area, which means, whatever your temperature or humidity dictates. What we always recommend is that for your ClearPlex mixture, you use a slightly heavier soap to water ratio. That will allow the film to float a little bit more when you're in the process of applying the film. If you use too little soap, the film can start to tack before you get the edges set right, which can potentially lead to adhesive smear or anything or things like that, which is obviously things you would want to avoid. All right, so moving on to our cutting tools. You have your stainless steel cutter. My blade of preference is a red dot blade, but you can use an Ulfa or any other brand. It's just mandatory and absolutely necessary that you use a stainless steel blade and not a carbon blade. If you are uncomfortable cutting on glass, you can use a grease pen or a grease pen, wax pen, or sometimes goes by the name of a China marker. You can use this to essentially trace an outline of the windshield on the film, remove the film from the glass to an area where you're comfortable cutting out the pattern, and then putting the pattern back onto the glass. This will obviously make it much less likely that you could potentially scratch or damage the glass. If you are comfortable cutting on glass, you can follow the same process that you follow with window tint. We will go over a couple specific techniques that you should apply to ClearPlex that might be a little different than window tint. That will help you get a much cleaner, nicer looking edge. Moving on to your heat shrinking tools, you have your wet edge squeegee. So this is essentially a hard card that is wrapped on one side with a microfiber suede cloth. You will be using the microfiber suede cloth during the heat shrinking, because when we're heat shrinking ClearPlex, we're actually heat shrinking on the film, not on the liner. Since we are heat shrinking on the film, you want to ensure that the tool that you're using is soft and it will not abrade or scratch the surface of the film. The heat gun that I like to use is a Steinel HG2320E. This specific gun has variable rates of fan as well as a digital temperature scale. The digital temperature scale does 2 things on this gun. 1, it allows you to set it to a specific temperature, and 2, it also tells you the actual temperature of the air blowing out of the gun. Finally, we have our installation tools. So I like to use the extended handle Fusion 5-inch blades. This allows me the leverage that I need to ensure that I get the correct amount of force and pressure on the center part of the glass. Since we're installing this on the windshield and on the exterior of the windshield, we're going to have to work over the hood of the car. So you're not going to have the same sort of angle of approach you might have on a side window or even on an interior windshield installation. Because of this, it's really nice having this extended handle to give you that leverage that you need to ensure that you're getting the proper amount of force to lay the film down properly. Next, we have 2 different squeegee blades. I have my yellow flat out, which is it's a medium hard stiffness rating, and then an orange crush, which is a softer stiffness rating. I use this squeegee blade for my first 3 passes, and then I use this squeegee blade for my last 3 passes, and I'll go into more detail as to why we use squeegee blades with different durometer ratings when we get to the part of the installation process we're actually laying down the film. And then finally, we have our white hard cards and microfiber cloths. We use these tools when we do the edge sealing, which is the last step of the process. So next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and show you how to measure the windshield properly and also how to clean and prep properly. This concludes the summary of the installation tools for the ClearPlex installation tutorial. Thank you.
Okay, we're moving to the next video now. Again, just a reminder, everybody, keep your volumes high. So this video, we're going to show you how to measure the windshield and also to remove the wipers and the side gaskets. The clean prep video will actually be the next video.
Okay, welcome back. So in this segment, what we are going to be covering is how to measure both the height and the width of the windshield, as well as how to determine if you can remove the side gaskets and if you have to remove the windshield wipers. We have already full disclosure, we have already removed the windshield wipers, but we will show you the whole process on how you can check to see if you can remove the side gaskets, which is extremely beneficial if you can. So the first thing what we're going to do is we're going to measure dead center of the windshield. That is going to be the tallest part of the windshield on maybe 99% of vehicles. On some vehicles that have an unsymmetrical bottom, so a Tesla Model 3 is a good example. The passenger side bottom has a dip compared to the driver's side. You would obviously need to measure the dip to determine how wide of film that you will need for that specific vehicle. But for a majority of vehicles that have a symmetrical bottom, which means it's identical curvature all the way across, you measure dead center, okay? So, and I would just like to introduce my colleague. This is Melissa Adams.
Hello.
Okay, so measuring dead center, this windshield measures 35 inches, okay? ClearPlex, we carry 4 different sizes of film: 36, 48, 60, and 72. My advice is that if you have a windshield that is within 2 inches of any of our sizes, you increase to the next corresponding larger size. So in this case, this windshield is 35 inches tall. I would recommend utilizing our 48-inch wide film, just because the way the windshields curve, you want to have a little excess on both the top and the bottom to ensure that the film covers all of the glass. If this was at 34 inches or below, then you could utilize our 36-inch film. Measuring the length, you always want to measure where the film, where the windshield curves kind of at the right angle on both the driver's and passenger's side. 99% of the time, this is the widest portion of the windshield. Windshields also always taper, so you'll never get the length measurement by measuring the top of the windshield. So measuring across, we have 62 inches. I always like to pull off an extra 2 or 3 inches on either side, so I'm going to pull off about 66 inches. Okay, so the next step would be to flip the windshield wipers up to see how the windshield wipers lay. Sometimes on vehicles you get lucky, you can flip the windshield wipers up and they're completely out of the way. You can cut the bottom edge and heat shrink the bottom edge and have perfect access to the bottom edge. But on some vehicles you can't. On this specific vehicle, when we flipped the windshield wipers up, they were still hovering over the bottom part of the glass by about 3 inches high and a good 8 inches wide. This made it so we didn't have a very good access to get a good clean line of or angle of approach to cut and heat shrink. So that's why we removed the windshield wipers. The next thing you're going to do is, some vehicles have floating glass and do not have side gaskets. That's awesome if they don't. You don't have to do anything to remove or prep. On this specific vehicle, it does have side gaskets. So you just by simply pulling on this, you can tell if the side gaskets can be removed, and these side gaskets can be removed very easily. So you just want to do kind of nice, consistent pressure pulling up to remove the side gasket. And we're going to do the same on that side. And the reason why you do this is, as you can see, once you remove the side gasket, you expose the edge of the glass, which allows you to trim right along the edge of the glass, and also allows you to apply the film so when you reinstall the side gaskets will actually be installed over the edge of the film. This means you will only have two visible edges of film, the top and the bottom. And the bottom is hidden by the windshield wipers and is really hard to see anyways. So really the only edge of film that will be apparent at all is the top. So if you can remove the side gaskets, it is highly, highly recommended that you do so. All right, so this covers this segment. The next segment, we're gonna do the clean prep. Thanks.
Okay, everybody, we've had some more participants join. I just wanted to go over that these videos have been pre-recorded. If you've missed any videos up until this point, this whole presentation will be uploaded to Madico U, and you'll be able to view these videos at your own leisure. This next video is actually going to be showing how to pull out the film and beginning the cutting process, and then we will be going into the cleaning and prep.
We're at this segment of pulling the film off that we need to cover the windshield and also cutting the film to fit. All right, so as I mentioned, we're going with our 48-inch size roll. We also have our 36-inch size roll and our 60-inch size roll. In addition, we do have a 72-inch size roll. These are the films that you use for like buses, trains, things of that nature, large RVs. Your 36 and your 48 are what you're going to be using for your average road-going vehicle. Most sedans can be covered with our 36-inch film. And what's really unique about Matico is we are the only company that offers a 36-inch film. So if you utilize a 48-inch on a car where you could utilize a 36-inch, you're scrapping at least 5.5 to 6 square feet of film per install, right? So it makes it so you can be a lot more efficient. Okay, so what I do when I pull off the film is I lay my tape measure out at about 30 inches on the ground, aligned with the edge of the film. What I do is I only like to work with about 30 inches of the film at any point in time. Because this is a little heavier gauge film, it has a tendency, if you pull out more than 30 inches, to fall in on itself, and then you can start getting kind of these little like almost pinpoints that are going to be visible when you install the film. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start curling the film in on itself, okay? I'm going to pull out to 30 inches. And at this point is when you're going to inspect the film as well. It's nice to have overhead light so you can see if there is any optical distortions. So I'm going to roll this up. And then remember, I was going to pull out 30 or 65 inches. So pull out another 30 inches or so. And then for good measure, I'm going to pull out another 5 or 6 inches just to make sure that we have enough film to cover edge to edge on the windshield. All right? Okay? So I have my knife. Okay, so Melissa is going to help me. Roll the film over the windshield. This being an SUV, sometimes it's easier to get inside the vehicle to do this. So she's going to grab that side. And we're always going to make sure that we keep the film taut so it doesn't fall in on itself, okay? All right. So as I'm adjusting the film, you want to make sure that you're not causing any creases. All right. So we pulled off a little bit more film than we really needed. So I'm going to just make my first cut to remove this excess. now what Melissa and I are going to do is she's going to pull the film her direction and I'm going to pull the film in my direction to make sure that it is evenly distributed over the surface of this glass, okay? Once we get to this point, I am going to get my wet edge squeegee. I'm going to wet the surface of the film, and I am going to do a tack line right down the middle. And this is the tack line that's going to hold the film in place as I cut it. Okay? There you go. I'm going to snap my blade to ensure that the blade is very sharp. And so next, what I'm going to do, being right-handed, it's easier for me to cut the passenger side first. I always start on the top edge. And let me backtrack a little bit. I'm going to cut off as much slack. I'm going to cut off as much slack and overlap before I actually start cutting this film to fit, okay? So I'm going to do that part of the process right now. This just helps the film be a little easier to work with as you're cutting it.
Okay guys, so we just broke that video up because it was a little long. So the next video is going to show how to cut the film to fit. So get the film edge to edge. Then the video after that is the clean prep. Just wanted to go over some housekeeping measures because we've had some people join. All of these videos have been pre-recorded like I've mentioned earlier. They will be available on Matico use, so everybody will have free reign to peruse these videos at their own leisure. Also, make sure your volume is turned all the way up. This will ensure you'll be able to get the clearest level of audio since these videos have been pre-recorded. All right, moving on to the next video. All right, so in this video, we've cut off all of the excess and we're going to show you how to cut the film to fit. Since this glass has floating glass, we're going to be actually trimming the film to the edge of the glass.
Okay, welcome back. So I've cut off all of the overlap. Essentially what I did is I cut off all of the places where the film was butting up to maybe the hood or the side of the car or just overlapping to too much of an extent on the roof of the vehicle. That just would make it a little bit cumbersome to do the actual cutting, okay? So now we're ready to cut this film to fit, all right? This segment is just going to show part of the cutting process, just in the essence of time, to ensure that we get this presentation within the hour allotted time. So I'm going to show you how I cut the top half of the driver's passenger side, as well as how I cut the passenger's A-pillar, okay? So the reason why I specifically like using a red dot blade is because of the how exact you can be in in pushing the blade out from, or in exposing, how exact you can be exposing the edge of the blade, okay? With an ULFA, what I find is the increments are too widely spaced that make it so you go from not exposing the blade at all to overly exposing, which can damage some of these gaskets. Whereas with the red dot, you can be very, very exact and very, very precise. So I will trim this film exactly to the edge of this glass. And that is what I'm going to shoot for to be my final cut. And as I'm cutting, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be angling my blade at a 45-degree angle in towards the glass. What this is going to do is this is going to do a couple things. One, it's going to ensure that there's actually a slight gap between the edge of the film and the edge of the glass, Because this is such a rigid film, you have to have a gap between the edge of the film and the edge of the glass to ensure that the film will have a good seal. And secondly, by beveling the edge of the film, you will make it less apparent and less visible. If you cut this film right at a 90-degree angle, it tends to leave a hard white line. So by cutting it at that 45-degree angle, you kind of hide the edge of the film and just make it less visible, okay? All right, so I wet the edge of the glass because I'm going to kind of run my hand along the film. This is going to ensure that what I'm cutting is taut against the glass. You want the film to be tight against the glass when you're cutting it. You absolutely do not want to be cutting into a finger. So that's why I'm going to start cutting right at about this midpoint of the windshield. At this midpoint, you have a finger. So I'm going to move that finger to the side, okay? And I'm going to put my blade in so the glass, the edge of the glass, rests between the edge of the blade and the blade holder, okay? And then I'm simply going to drag my blade until I get to the next finger. So I get to the next finger, I'm going to move the finger, make sure that the film that I'm cutting against is taut against the glass. And I'm just going to try to keep my pressure consistent. Okay. So now we have cut the top half of the we've cut the passenger side of the top edge of the film. Okay. You can see, if you bring the camera closer, the edge of the film butts up right to the edge of the glass. You can be this precise if you so choose. If you do want to have a little bit more of a gap just to ensure that the film has a nice seal to the glass, what you can do is you can move the film up 1/8 of an inch, do one more trim, shift it back so it settles and gives you a nice consistent 1/8 of an inch gap. But that's completely up to you. All right. Every about 2 feet or so, I'm going to snap my blade. This film is extremely rigid and also thick and also very hard. So it has a tendency to dull down the edge of the glass, or dull down the edge of the blade quite quickly. All right. So now I'm going to start cutting the passenger side. Okay. And I'm going to follow the same process that I followed on the top. I'm going to make sure that the edge that I'm cutting is tight against the glass. And then as soon as I get to a finger, I'm going to move that finger up. One of the nice things about these edges on either side of the A-pillars are that we don't have to be as exact because we're going to be putting this side gasket over, okay? So if your blade wobbles a little bit here, that does not mean you have to scrap this whole entire piece of film. That's why it's really nice removing the side gaskets. It gives you a little bit of room for error if your blade wobbles or you end up, you know, dragging your blade or catching the film or doing something that makes that edge imprecise. Okay, so we're going to continue down. And then so we have now cut the top passenger side and the passenger's A-pillar. This completes our cutting segment. When we resume, we're going to go to the heat shrinking part of the process, and at that point the film will be cut to fit. Thank you. All right, so this segment we're going to cover the cleaning and prep portion of the installation process. So just to recap the tools that we're going to use, we have our 3-inch scraper and our 1-inch scraper, our white scrub pads, and we have 2 different sets. We have our white scrub pads that we're going to be using with the slip solution, and our white scrub pads that we're going to be using with the undiluted alcohol solution. Then we just have our standard glass squeegees and microfiber cloths. So first step that we're going to do is we're going to spray our windshield down with our slip solution. Okay, my colleague Melissa is going to help me out. We're going to scrub the windshield down. We're going to make sure that we scrub the whole entire surface of the glass. One way to know that you have a good soap to water ratio is that you get a nice, good, kind of consistent froth of soap over the surface of the glass as you scrub, okay? Once we've scrubbed, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to massage the glass with our hands to make note of anywhere where there might be imperfections, divots, where there might be an impact mark that creates a crater. That's where you're going to want to go over those areas specifically with your scraper, okay? So after we're done massaging the glass, what we're going to do is we're going to each get our respective scrapers, and we're going to scrape the entire windshield. I like to scrape the entire windshield. We're essentially going to use our scrapers, in essence, almost like a squeegee, okay? All right, so in the essence of time, and due to the fact that these videos are kind of taking up a lot of memory, we're going to skip forward to getting the slip, removing the slip solution from the surface of the glass, okay? So we're going to, in theory, use our scraper to scrape over the entire portion of the glass. Then we're going to spray one more time to do a final massage to make sure that there are no more imperfections, no more caked on dirt and debris. Once we've ensured that the surface is free of any debris, free of any imperfections in the glass, we're then going to squeegee clean the glass. All right. Next, we are going to spray the glass with 91% isopropyl alcohol solution. The purpose of this is to remove any ceramic coatings or any hydrophobic coatings. If you know that a car has a specific type of ceramic coating, i.e. Ceramic Pro or Modesta or something like that, then our recommendation is always to follow the manufacturer's guideline for removal or stripping. So if they have a specific process that they advise to strip off that ceramic coating, we advise to follow that process. If you do not know, 91% isopropyl alcohol is a good bet to strip off anything, and just by good practice, even if you don't know if there's a ceramic coating on there or not, it's good practice always to spray down the windshield with 91% isopropyl alcohol. Okay. Just for the essence of time.
Interest of time.
In the interest of time. Thank you for that vocabulary lesson. We're going to go a little bit faster than we normally would, okay? All right, so utilizing your same cleaning squeegee, we are going to remove the alcohol solution. And then following this, we won't cover this in this video segment, we are going to spray down the glass one more time with our slip solution, scrub down the glass, squeegee it clean just to ensure all of the alcohol solution has been removed from the glass. This covers the clean prep segment of the installation tutorial.
Okay, everybody, thank you. So we're going to take our first quick break here, and I'm going to turn it over to Lauren Messing to see if we have any questions.
David, we did get one question. Some vehicles, the windshields are very soft. Have you ever had any scratching of the glass with razors on those type of windshields?
So, I mean, what we've seen is glass has just gotten overall softer with kind of new makes and models, and also thinner. So yeah, yes, we have seen incidents of that happening, but if you follow the proper precautions, you know, which means you cut the film as you would cut window tint, or you utilize the wax pen. Utilizing the wax pen will definitely mitigate any potential of scratching the glass, right? Because you won't be doing any cutting on the actual glass. You're creating a pattern and then taking the film off of the glass and cutting it, you know, on your glass cutting board that you might be hanging on a wall or on a table or on a cutting mat. But another thing too is more and more cars have floating glass. It's a really kind of like common feature on newer makes and models. So what that means is on cars that have floating glass, just like this Land Rover Discovery, you will only have one edge that you would have to cut on the glass. Your A-pillars and the top of your glass are always going to be exposed, which means you can trim. And I've never had any instance where an installer has told me if they follow our guideline of how to trim along the edge of the glass, that they ended up damaging the glass at all. So for this specific example, what I did, because, you know, I don't window tint every day, it's not my daily job, I trimmed the A-pillars, I trimmed the top, and then I used that wax grease pen on the bottom to cut, and I was able to get a really exact cut. So that would be my recommendation and guidance.
And then somebody else asked, David, what is the suggested retail cost for this type of vehicle?
So we do get to that in a little bit later, but when you price ClearPlex, you have to price it according to what the windshield replacement cost for that specific vehicle would be, right? So that's why I highly recommend everybody watch the Intro to ClearPlex webinar. In the Intro to ClearPlex webinar, we discuss the recommended retail pricing, and we also discuss the target market for ClearPlex. So this vehicle, this Land Rover Discovery, has ADAS enabled, or ADAS features in the windshield. That makes this windshield about $1,700 to replace. So if you charge this is all US averages, the US average of around $450 to $550 for a ClearPlex installation, which at that price point will net you a profit of around $250 to $300 or so. That comes in at a third of the cost of replacing the windshield. And ultimately, that's kind of the happy zone where you want to be. If you're able to price ClearPlex at around a third to a quarter of the cost of one windshield replacement, it makes it a very easy sale for a daily driver. So for somebody who drives a Porsche, a Ferrari, or a Lamborghini, those windshields are $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. There's really no price consideration that you have to factor into, you know, when you're determining your price. But when you're selling to a daily driver, it's definitely a factor that you have to consider. What we've seen though is that windshields are increasing in cost, in replacement cost, dramatically. So if you have a newer make and model that has ADAS features in the windshield, that windshield generally is going to be above $1,500. So if you follow our guideline, like I mentioned, pricing around the $500 price point, you should be successful at converting these sort of opportunities.
Okay, those are the questions for now. Go on with the rest of the videos, and then we'll have time at the end.
All right. So this video, what I'm going over right here is setting the H pattern. So we're doing a wet shrink, and we're also doing an H pattern to throw your stress to the top and bottom of the windshields.
This segment we've already clean prepped the windshield. We have already cut the film. We have now laid the film pattern over the windshield, and we're going to show you how to set your middle tack and your A-pillar tack, because we're going to do an H pattern to get ready for the heat shrinking part of the process, okay? So the first step that we're going to do, and Melissa, my colleague, is going to help, is we are both going to pull just to make sure that the film is taut, that it's taut across and evenly spread across the surface of the glass, okay? We're going to make sure and look at the edges, that we have even edges on the A-pillars and the top and bottom, okay? Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my horizontal tack. You're going to set your horizontal tack about 2/3 of the way up the windshield. The reason for that is you want more stress to go down to the bottom than up to the top. And the reason for that is because windshields are tapered. It means you have more surface area in the bottom, thus you want more stress down at the bottom. More surface area will allow you, will make it easier to work that stress versus if you threw it up to the top, okay? So we're going to start with about 1.5 squeegee width wide tack down the middle, and then we're going to do our H tack down the side, okay? On the A-pillars. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a step back, and I'm going to look at how my fingers are distributed. I'm going to look at the top, and I'm going to look at the bottom, okay? So at the top, you see we have 3 fingers. One that is right about in the middle, one that's about in the middle in between the passenger's top corner in the middle, and then another finger that's in the middle between the driver's top corner in the middle. And then I'm also going to look at the bottom, and I'm going to see that I have 4 fingers. Each finger is about the same size and is in about the same area if you cut the windshield in half, okay? That's exactly what you want. Windshields have identical mirror image curvatures on the passenger side and the driver's side. Because of that, you should have the same exact stress on either side. So your top passengers should look identical to your top drivers, and your bottom drivers should look identical to your bottom passengers, okay? This concludes this step. At this point, you do not want to start splitting up your fingers just yet. You don't want to really isolate your fingers just yet. We're going to move on to the next segment to show you how to heat shrink. In that part of the process, I'll show you how to break the fingers up. But at this point, you are now ready to move on to the process of heat shrinking.
Okay, guys, so right now we're going to show you the wet shrinking technique that we teach. We're going to focus first on how we heat shrink the top driver's quadrant.
All right, so we're now getting to the part of the installation where you're going to start heat shrinking or heat forming the ClearPlex film. As you can see, we teach a wet shrink. The reason why we teach a wet shrink is because this is a thicker gauge film. It's 4 mil thick. It requires a little bit more heat. Wet shrinking makes it easier, or makes it less likely to burn the film, and also less likely to overheat the glass and potentially cause the glass to combust. All right, so the concept that you're going to use when you shrink this is you're going to shrink this in quadrants. You're going to shrink the top passengers, then the top drivers, then the bottom passengers, and the bottom drivers. It doesn't really matter which quadrant you start on. For me, I usually like to start on the top. The whole concept, though, is as you work a quadrant, you want to keep working the quadrant continuously without stopping, because if you stop and pull your gun away and you allow the film to cool down, you'll have a much harder time getting the film to react and and then form to the underlying surface, okay? So the first thing that I want to cover is I'm going to be taking my heat gun. My heat gun is on the highest fan setting, and it's at 1,150 degrees. I am first going to pass my heat gun from the top corner of the driver's side to the middle, back and forth several times. to get the whole entire quadrant warm. Then I am going to focus on this finger right here, which is larger, which means it's carrying a little bit more stress. And also what you can do is when you have fingers that have this Y look, kind of whale tail, you can split it, all right? Now, I don't want you to really overly isolate the fingers, just simply split it. Don't try to push the water out. You want the moisture there so the fingers can kind of move where they want to move, okay? All right, so starting here, I'm gonna start heating this edge up. I'm making sure that the heat is overlapping the edge of the film, okay? Now, I'm going to heat these two fingers, and I'm going to make sure the heat is going beyond the outer limits of the finger and over the edge of the film, and I'm going to focus on this finger. As soon as that edge reacts, I'm going to move the gun down, okay? So what I mean by reacting is that edge is going to collapse in on itself. And once it starts collapsing in on itself, that's a telltale sign that you know that it's ready for you to walk the heat gun down and then bring your squeegee up to lay that stress down along the glass, okay? All right, so now I'm gonna take care of this finger in the middle, following the same process. My heat is gonna overlap the edge of the finger, or overlap the edge of the film, go beyond the outer limits of the finger, and then as soon as that edge reacts, I'm gonna move my gun down. Okay, so we're going, the two most important things to keep in mind is that your heat is overlapping the edge of the film and going beyond the outer limits of the finger. And as soon as that reacts, that's when you know you're ready to move the heat down, okay? All right, so now, if you ever have side fingers that pop up, what I want you to do before you throw this stress up to the top, I want you to spray a little moisture under there, and with your squeegee, see if this will stay down. If that stays down for a second or two count, you do not need to move that stress up to the top or bottom, okay? So we're now gonna pause this video. We're gonna resume showing you how to shrink the one of the bottom quadrants. Thank you.
Okay, everybody, before we actually move to the bottom quadrant, where we have a very up-close video that's about a minute long, showing how to, showing kind of just a up-close zoom of shrinking the top driver's quadrant. Just some housekeeping measures, because more people have joined. Make sure your volume is turned up. Just for everyone's reference, these videos were pre-recorded. If you have missed any of these slides, you will be able to go back on Matico U in the coming days. We will have this full presentation uploaded. In addition, we will have more videos focusing specifically on the heat shrinking part of the process, okay? All right, so there's not a whole lot of dialogue, so I'm gonna be talking through this clip, okay? So what I want you guys to be focusing on is the process that we teach for heat shrinking ClearPlex it's essentially opposite from window tint. With window tint, you would be shrinking, or you would start hitting the fingers from the middle part of the film and work towards the edge, whereas with ClearPlex, it's opposite. You're gonna work from the edge of the finger to the middle. Some people call this pocket shrinking, that's one word for it. But the most important thing is as you are moving your heat along the edge of the film, it's absolutely essential that your heat is overlapping the edge of that film. I know I've probably said this like a dozen times so far in this training tutorial, but that's the most common issue that I'll run into with installers, is they will think that they're heating the edge, but in reality, they'll have their gun oriented maybe half an inch up from the edge. What happens is the finger will look like it's reacting. You'll move the gun down. Then as you bring your squeegee back up, most all of the finger will lay down, but that last half inch, so if the finger was say 4 inches wide and you had your gun oriented half an inch away from the edge, you would be left with this short kind of fat finger. It would be 4 inches wide, half an inch tall, and those are just a real pain to get to lay down. So that's just why I really want to overemphasize those 2 points. One, making sure that you're heating the edge of the film, you're going beyond the outer limits of the finger. And the reason why it's important to go to heat beyond the outer limits of the finger is, as you've seen in these videos, what happens when you bring a finger down, especially in the early stages of heat shrinking, is those fingers tend to split, all right? And then the fingers that split can even split, and they'll split into surrounding film, right? Film that is on the outside areas of where that original finger was sitting. So if you go ahead and essentially kind of preheat the area where those fingers will split into, you'll have a much easier time getting those split fingers to lay down than you would if you had only heated the area where that original finger was located, and then now you had to reintroduce the heat to the area where that finger just split into, which would be an area where the film had not received any heat up to that point, okay? So that's just why I like to overemphasize those 2 points. Heating past the outer limits of the finger and overheating, and then heating that edge of the film, okay? So this next video, we're gonna move to the bottom passenger's quadrant. It's essentially kind of the same process, but we're just showing you how to heat shrink a different part of the film.
Just to covered heat shrinking the top driver's quadrant. We are now gonna cover heat shrinking the bottom passenger's quadrant, okay? So again, just to recap how I'm going to initially start attacking this quadrant, I'm going to start heating from this corner to the middle part of the film and then back, okay? I'm going to make several passes back and forth, several passes back and forth. Then I'm going to focus on taking this middle finger out first, and the reason for that is the middle part of the glass tends to be where the glass flattens out. You want to pull stress away from there rather than potentially pushing stress to a flat part of the glass, because if you do have to take stress out of an area where the glass is a little bit flatter, it's going to be much more difficult to do that from a flat part of the glass than a part of the glass that's curved like here, okay? So I'm going to start making sure that my heat is overlapping the edge of the film, okay? And you can tell that it's overlapping the edge of the film because the finger will actually move, almost kind of like a kite in the wind, okay? So now I'm going to start focusing on this middle finger. As soon as it reacts, and it reacts by sort of collapsing in on itself, then I know that it's ready for me to move my gun up the finger, okay, and then take it down with my squeegee. Now I'm going to move to the finger that's in the middle. Same thing. I'm going to start heating the edge of the film. I'm also going to make sure that my gun is going beyond the outer limits of the finger. Okay? I'm going to continue heating, continue heating. As soon as it reacts, the finger reacts, I'm going to bring my gun up. Continue this process. Continue this process. You always want to keep your gun moving. You never want it to be too static. If you keep the gun static, that's where you can run the risk of burning the film. Okay, so you see how that finger kind of fought, but the last thing you want to do when you're working a finger is to stop. You want to keep working that. You want to keep your gun moving. You want to keep your gun moving, and that makes sure that the film stays warm and that it wants to react. All right, now all we have to do is take care of this finger in the corner, and we have now heat shrunk the bottom passenger's quadrant. Okay, so here's a good thing to point out. See how this finger is not sitting kind of at a nice 90-degree angle? It's kind of cockeyed. If that ever happens, what you want to do is you want to push that finger to where it's sitting at a 90-degree angle. It's going to react much better, okay? So this finger should lay down right now. And there it goes. Okay, so then now the last step that you want to do to ensure that you have that quadrant nice and sealed and heat shrunk is you're just going to run across the edges once or twice. That might expose some hidden fingers. But once you have the edge sealed, and I'll show you what I mean. And one way that you can tell if the edge is sealed is by spraying water underneath the edge. And then with your squeegee, getting the film to lay down. If the water sucks down and it holds down for that, second or two count, the film is properly heat shrunk and heat formed, okay? So this covers the heat shrinking portion of the installation process.
Okay, guys, we have one more video that covers the heat shrinking. I show you how the film looks when it's completely heat shrunk. We skip ahead to that. Then we're going to take questions. Just a couple things that I want to point out right now. You saw in that video, in this last video, how that finger, the last finger got cockeyed, okay? Sometimes what will happen is you'll have fingers that fight you. If a finger's fighting you, a finger looks cockeyed, by all means move the finger, okay? Sometimes as you pull the moisture out from underneath, from the film will start tacking, even though the liner's on, the film will start tacking to the glass, okay? And that might trap a finger somewhere, and that might not actually be the area where that finger wants to be worked. So we saw that with that last finger in the bottom passenger's quadrant. It was cockeyed kind of into the corner. I moved it so it became a right angle, and it sucked right down as soon as I put some heat on it, okay? So that's something that you always want to do throughout the process. Just keep moving fingers to the side. Sometimes it'll be dramatic. A finger might move 6 or 8 inches and then finally settle, and then it'll be able to be worked much easier than where it was originally sitting, okay? So don't lock yourself in. That's another common thing that I'll see with kind of new installers, is they think that if a finger is sitting somewhere, that must mean that's exactly where the finger has to be worked. That is absolutely not the case. And that is why we teach a wet shrink. Full disclosure, you can dry shrink ClearPlex. There's many shops that do. And our goal is to maybe upload some of those videos in the coming days and weeks. We teach wet shrinking for the reasons that I mentioned earlier: harder to damage the film, also much less likely to overheat the glass. All right. So In this video, the film has now been completely heat shrunk. I'm just kind of telling you what you need to look for as an installer to make sure that the film is heat shrunk and will lay down when you go to install it.
Okay, welcome back. All right, so we finished heat shrinking this film. As you can see, the top edge, the bottom edge, and both A-pillars are sealed. Once those are sealed and all of the fingers are removed, you know that you have properly heat shrunk the film. As you start pulling the moisture out, the film might have a tendency to lift. So I'll give you a little example of that. So here, okay, this appears as though there's a finger. And sometimes this might trick you into thinking you have to push that down to the bottom or the top to heat form. But before you do that, the step that I want you to do is introduce a little moisture, okay? With your squeegee, try to get that to lay down. If that will lay down for a 1 second count, you do not need to move that to the top or bottom, okay? So that laid down, again, the A-pillar edges, the top and bottom edges are sealed, so we are now ready to move to the last step of the installation process, which is removing the release liner and squeegeeing on the film. All right, thank you.
All right, guys. So we are going to take a quick break here, see if there are any questions. Lauren or Karen, please shoot questions my way if we have any.
Okay, David, somebody's asking about the warranty and whether it depends on mileage.
Well, yes. So our standard North American, U.S. warranty is 18,000 miles, 18 months. It is a manufacturer's defect warranty. So the warranty is covering things like adhesive failure, yellowing, cracking, delamination, things of that nature.
And then we have another question. Can ClearPlex be used on side windows as a security film?
Yes, it can. So there's videos on YouTube, both on our channel. You can look up if you just want to jot down notes, ClearPlex versus like VS. So you type in ClearPlex, the way that we spell it, VS space hammer, and then VS, like V as in Victor, S as in Sam, space, I think it's rock. Those are two videos that were shot by one of our distributors in Europe several years ago. And then we also have a couple videos that we did ourselves. We also did videos that show how it withstands spark plugs, because people aren't aware that's a common way that thieves will do smash and grabs, because spark plugs will just like instantaneously break tempered glass, and our film will prevent that. So yes, you can do that. This is removing the liner and laying the film on the windshield.
All right, okay, so we're now to the step of removing the release liner and placing the film on the windshield. I like to use 2 people for this step of the process. It limits the potential of creasing or bending or damaging the film in any way. So Melissa is going to be pulling up as I pull down. This will make it a lot easier to remove the release liner. Okay? Get that out of the way, because the release liner can be extremely slippery, so the last thing you want to do is slip on it. So right now Melissa is currently holding the A-pillar of the driver's side, so I'm going to grab that and let me just wet the corners. It's important to wet your fingers to lessen the possibility of transferring oil or fingerprints onto the film, okay? So we're gonna hold the film, we're gonna keep it kind of relaxed, okay? So now we're going to lay the film on the glass, all right? This is a very important part of the process. Before you start squeegeeing, what you are gonna want to do is you're gonna wanna first make sure that the film is aligned, okay? This is why you like to have a high soap to water ratio, so you can
Okay, so that was the finishing part of this video. Moving on, this next video shows how we take out all of the stress of the film with our hands before we hit the film with the squeegee. And then we're going to show you the beginning part of the squeegee process. I really want you to pay attention on how we take the stress out with our hands before we hit the film with the squeegee, because doing this properly will ensure you don't have any adhesive smears.
Film on the car, or on the windshield. We're now aligning the edge of the film with the edge of the glass. The next step that we're going to do before we take a squeegee to the film is Melissa and I are going to take all of this stress out of the film, okay? So we're going to start in the middle, work towards the edge, and work up into the corner. So before you hit the film with a squeegee, you want almost all of the stress out, okay? And again, this is why you like to have a lot of soap, a higher soap to water ratio. This allows you to continuously kind of realign the film and avoid it from tacking down to the glass. All right, so now we're going to take our yellow flat out. We're going to make sure that the surface of the film is wet. And Melissa and I are going to first, she's going to hold the film in place. I'm going to do a tap right down this horizontal center. And I'm going to do two. As you can see, I'm overlapping each. And a third. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do vertical passes. One down and one up, so equal and opposite, okay? Once I've done 3 or 4 vertical passes, Melissa is going to do her horizontal pass, all right? You don't want to use too much force in this step because you don't want to have to realign the film after you do this initial pass, if at all possible. So that's why we're using a stiffer squeegee blade. That allows us to use less force while still pushing out the residual moisture. Okay? So now I'm going to re-wet my side. And most of my passes were vertical. So for this, or most of my strokes were vertical on my last pass. So for this pass, I'm going to take most of my strokes horizontal. All right? So the whole idea is that you want to do a crosshatch pattern, vertical and horizontal. And that way, you're kind of stretching the film out as evenly as possible. Okay? And again, the most important thing is you want to overlap each of your strokes. Okay? Okay, one more pass with this yellow flat out. Then I'm going to move to the ClearMax blade. Okay. So now we're going to move to the ClearMax blade or the Orange Crush blade, and we're going to use a little bit more force. We're going to stop the video now, and we're going to resume the video back once we start sealing up these A-pillars. Okay, welcome back, guys. All right, so we are now almost done with the full ClearPlex installation process. We have the whole entire passenger side locked down. We're now finishing up locking down the driver's side. All right, we've done 6 full passes, so we've taken out all of the residual moisture in the middle part of the film, but we still have some of these side fingers that are popping up. That's completely normal. What we're going to do is we're going to re-squeegee this whole entire half side just to ensure we're not trapping any moisture. And when we get to the edge, what we're doing is we've switched to our softer squeegee. We're going to use a lot of force to push down this small finger, and immediately after, we're going to follow up with a little bit of heat and a hard card, and that's going to seal that down, okay? I'm just going to introduce a little bit of moisture just to make sure that when I do lay that down, it lays down nice and consistently, nice and evenly. All right, so starting from the middle, as you can see, it's perfectly optically clear. We have not trapped any residual moisture. That's because we are overlapping each of our passes and being consistent with our pressure and really fluid with our strokes, okay? So now we're getting to the point where we're about hitting the side fingers. I'm going to stop going vertical, and I'm going to take my strokes now horizontal, and Melissa is going to help me. She's going to hit this with heat as soon as I go over this. Okay. Hit that with the hard card. Yep. And then now we're going to do the same with that small little finger. We're just going to continue our way up. Now heat that. Okay. Now we're going to finish taking the rest of the stress down. All right, so now we're immediately going to transition to heat sealing the edges of this film. So we're going to take your heat gun and you are going to just run the heat gun all around the edge of this film to make sure that these edges are heat sealed. It's important that when you go over the edge, you don't pull your hard card back because that might peel up the edge, okay? All right, thank you.
Okay, so we're going to skip to this last video now. We just kept repeating that process all the way up the driver's side A-pillar. And then we showed you how to heat seal, and then you just continue that process along all of the edges. The top edge, bottom edge, driver's side A-pillar, passenger side A-pillar. You take your heat gun, regardless if there's any edge lift or not, that will just suck out any sort of residual moisture and make it so you have a nice, really clean edge. This last video, what you're going to be seeing is you're going to see how the driver's side A-pillar looks. So there's a couple things I want you to notice. One, how optically clear it is, and two, how close to the edge of the glass we get.
All right, everybody. So we have now finished heat sealing the edges of the film. So we are now finished with the installation process. I do just want to point out how close you can get ClearPlex to the edge of the glass to still have it have a sufficient seal to the glass to ensure no moisture, dirt, and debris will get up underneath the film or the glass. So I'm going to slowly move the camera up. The edge of the glass is right here where my finger is. And as you can see, there is no visible gap between the film and the glass. You can get the film that close by simply shaving the film at a 45-degree angle alongside the edge of the glass. If you want somewhat of a gap, that is okay. We recommend keeping your gap to a minimum, to a maximum of 1/8 of an inch between the edge of the film and the edge of the glass. That way it just makes it a lot less apparent and a lot less visible. But I'd just like to thank everybody for taking the time to watch the ClearPlex installation process. We are going to upload more videos in the coming days to show kind of more details, show more in-depth steps on how to take care of fingers, how to make sure, how to lay the film down, how to cut the film, just to do the process in a whole rather than segmented like we did today. Thank you.
All right, everybody. So I know we don't have much time, so we'll just go to the last questions or see if we have any questions. Karen and Lauren, please go ahead.
What is the temperature that you had on the heat gun?
So the temperature was 1,150 degrees Fahrenheit.
Should the film be an exact fit or 1/8 inch short so it will not lift on the edges?
So you can, if it's a windshield that has floating glass, you can trim the film right to the edge of the glass and it will not lift. If it's a windshield that has gaskets that you cannot remove, you want to have that 1/8 of an inch gap. The closer you get to the edge, the more likely it is to lift. So trimming, kind of shaving the edge of the film is kind of a more advanced technique. If you're kind of novice and more beginner, then my recommendation is maybe to start with an 1/8 of an inch gap and just see how kind of comfortable you are. If you shave the film to the edge of the glass, you have to make sure that you've done a really, really good clean prep so no dirt or debris gets introduced during the installation process. So kind of two-part answer to that.
Should you add moisture while you're doing heat shrinking?
That is something you can do. Now, I do always kind of want to point out that you're going to have the most success if you start and finish your quadrant continuously without stopping. The more times you stop and pull your heat gun away from the film, the more times you give the film a chance to cool down, and then you have to warm it back up just to get it to start reacting again. And that stresses the film. So that like process of cooling down and heating up and cooling down and heating up can stress the film, which then in turn can increase the likelihood of like damaging the film. So it's kind of a balancing act that you want to play. If it gets to the point where it's like bone dry, yeah, you do have to introduce moisture. And sometimes too, if you have an overly difficult windshield, I've done this plenty of times before. I have just pulled the film off, re-wet the windshield, and then just re-tacked it down, almost starting from scratch. That's not a bad idea either if you have a windshield that's kind of fighting you. But I always want to stress, if you can continuously work a quadrant from start to finish without stopping, that's going to be the easiest, and it's going to have the best finished product.
So David, this is the last question, and then we're going to cut it off because we have gone a little bit over. But okay. Is there a recommended room temperature conditions that you recommend for installation?
So, in all reality, like the warmer the better. But you want to be comfortable working in that situation. The colder, the more the film is going to be brittle, right? I mean, we've had instances where we'll have installers that have heat, like, IR heat lamps that will be overhead, and they swear by it, and they say that, like, it's the same lamps that you might use to cure ceramic coatings, and they say it makes the film easier to work with. You don't have to get to that extent, but ultimately the film requires heat to form, so really the warmer the better.
Okay, thank you so much everyone for hanging on. Almost everyone's still on the line. We appreciate it. Any questions that we didn't get to, I did take down some people's individual email addresses, but feel free to email us and we will answer your questions privately. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.